It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I first saw him. I was sitting on my usual bench in the park, lost in thought, when a man approached me. He was tall, with piercing blue eyes and a faint scar above his brow. What struck me most was the way he looked at me, like he had known me forever. "Emma," he said softly, and my heart skipped a beat. How did he know my name? Before I could respond, he handed me a faded photograph. It was of us, together, smiling in a place I had never been. "We've met before," he said. "In another life." I laughed nervously, thinking it was some kind of prank. But the intensity in his eyes made me pause. He introduced himself as Daniel and insisted we had a connection that transcended time. I was skeptical, yet something about him felt eerily familiar. As he walked away, he left me with a cryptic warning. Don't trust everything you see. The past isn't always what it seems. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the photograph. It looked old, the edges frayed and the colors faded, but the people in it were unmistakably us. I stared at my own face, younger but undeniably me, and Daniel's, exactly as he looked today. How was this possible? I turned the photo over and found a date scribbled on the back, June 15th, 1945. My hands trembled. That was decades before I was born. I spent hours researching, trying to find an explanation. The more I dug, the more questions I had. Who took the photo? Where was it taken? And why did Daniel seem to remember a life I had no memory of? The next morning, I returned to the park, hoping to find him. He wasn't there, but I found a small, folded note tucked under the bench. It read, "Meet me at the old clock tower at midnight. Bring the photograph." The clock tower stood at the edge of town, a relic of a bygone era. I arrived just before midnight, the photograph clutched tightly in my hand. The air was thick with anticipation as I climbed the creaky stairs to the top. Daniel was waiting, his silhouette framed by the moonlight streaming through the arched windows. "You came," he said, his voice tinged with relief. He began to tell me a story, one that sounded like it belonged in a fairy tale. He claimed we had been lovers in the 1940s, torn apart by war and tragedy. He said he had been searching for me across lifetimes, and now, finally, we were together again. I wanted to dismiss it as madness, but the sincerity in his voice and the photograph in my hand made it impossible to ignore. "There's more," he said, pulling out a small, weathered journal. "This will explain everything." The journal was filled with handwritten entries, each one detailing moments from a life I didn't remember. Daniel handed it to me, his hands trembling slightly.
"This is yours," he said.
"You wrote it during the war." I flipped through the pages, my heart racing as I recognized my own handwriting. The entries spoke of love, loss, and a desperate hope to reunite with Daniel. One passage stood out. "Asterisk, if we don't make it through this, I'll find you again. No matter how long it takes, no matter how many lifetimes, I'll find you." Asterisk, my breath caught in my throat. Could this be real? Was I truly the woman in the journal, reincarnated after all these years? Daniel watched me intently, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Do you believe me now?" he asked. That night, I had a dream, or was it a memory? I was standing on a cobblestone street, wearing a dress from the 1940s. Daniel was there, holding my hand as we ran through the rain, laughing. The scene shifted, and suddenly we were in a dimly lit room, the sound of bombs echoing in the distance. He kissed me, and I felt a love so profound it took my breath away. When I woke up, tears were streaming down my face. I called Daniel, desperate to share what I had seen. He listened quietly, then said, "It's starting to come back to you." He explained that the more time we spent together, the more my memories would return. But he also warned me that not all of them would be pleasant. "The past is complicated," he said. "There are things you might not want to remember." As the days passed, I began to experience flashes of memories, moments of joy, but also moments of pain. One memory in particular haunted me, a heated argument with Daniel, his face twisted in anger. I couldn't remember what we were fighting about, but the intensity of the emotions stayed with me. When I asked Daniel about it, he hesitated. "We weren't perfect," he admitted. "We made mistakes." His evasiveness made me uneasy. I started to wonder if there was more to the story than he was telling me. Then one evening, I received an anonymous note slipped under my door. It read, "Be careful. Daniel isn't who he says he is." My heart raced as I stared at the words. Who had sent it? And what did they know that I didn't? I decided to confront Daniel about the note. He looked shocked when I showed it to him, but then his expression darkened. "There's someone who doesn't want us to be together," he said. "Someone from our past." He explained that there had been a rival, a man named Thomas, who had been in love with me in our previous life. Thomas had tried to keep us apart, and it seemed he was still trying. Daniel's explanation made sense, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. That night, I did something I hadn't done before. I searched his apartment. In a drawer, I found a stack of letters addressed to him, all from someone named Clara. The letters were filled with longing and regret. Who was Clara? And why had Daniel never mentioned her? I confronted Daniel about the letters, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "Clara was someone I knew a long time ago," he said, his voice trembling. She was part of the reason we were torn apart." He explained that Clara had been his fiancée in our previous life, and our love had caused a scandal that led to tragedy. "I never stopped loving you," he said, "but I carry the guilt of what happened every day." His confession left me reeling. I didn't know how to feel, betrayed, angry, or heartbroken. Part of me wanted to walk away, but another part couldn't let go of the connection we shared. That night, I dreamed of Clara. She was beautiful, with sad eyes and a voice full of sorrow. "Don't trust him," she whispered. "He's not telling you everything." I decided to dig deeper into Clara's story. I visited the local library and spent hours poring over old newspapers. Finally, I found what I was looking for, a headline from 1945. Local woman dies in tragic accident. The article described how Clara had fallen from a balcony during a party. Witnesses claimed she had been arguing with someone moments before her death. That someone was Daniel. My hands shook as I read the article. Had Daniel been involved in Clara's death? Was that why he carried so much guilt? I needed answers, but I wasn't sure I was ready to hear them. That evening, I met Daniel at the park. When I showed him the article, his face turned pale. "It wasn't my fault," he said, his voice breaking. "But I've blamed myself every day since." Daniel's confession was heartbreaking. He explained that Clara had discovered our affair and confronted him at the party. They had argued, and in a moment of anger, she had stepped too close to the edge of the balcony. He had tried to save her, but it was too late. "I loved her," he said, tears streaming down his face. "But I loved you more. And that guilt has followed me ever since." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to forgive him, but another part wondered if I could ever trust him again. That night, I had another dream, this time of Clara. She didn't speak, but her eyes held a message. Be careful. When I woke up, I knew I had to make a choice. Let go of the past or risk losing myself in it. I spent days torn between my feelings for Daniel and the growing unease in my heart. The memories of our past life were becoming more vivid, but so were the doubts. Could I trust a man who had carried such a heavy secret for so long? I decided to meet him one last time, at the park where it all began. The autumn leaves crunched under my feet as I approached the bench where he sat, his head bowed. "I don't know if I can do this," I said, my voice trembling. Daniel looked up, his eyes filled with pain. "I understand," he replied. "But before you walk away, there's something you need to see." He handed me a small, intricately carved box. Inside was a ring, a simple gold band with an inscription. Forever yours, 1945. It was the ring he had given me in our past life. "I've been waiting to give this back to you," he said. "But I'll understand if you don't want it." That night, I slipped the ring onto my finger, and something extraordinary happened. A flood of memories rushed through me, moments of love, laughter, and heartbreak. I saw myself as I was in 1945, standing in a church, exchanging vows with Daniel. I saw Clara, her face filled with sorrow as she watched from the shadows. And I saw the night she died, the truth of what happened clearer than ever before. Clara hadn't fallen by accident. She had jumped, unable to bear the pain of losing Daniel to me. The guilt I felt was overwhelming, but so was the love I had for him. When I woke up, I knew I couldn't walk away. Our love was complicated, but it was real. I called Daniel and told him I wanted to try again. His relief was palpable, but I could hear the hesitation in his voice.
"There's still so much you don't know," he said.
Just as I thought we were moving forward, the stranger from the park reappeared. This time, he wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, her face eerily familiar. It was Clara, or someone who looked exactly like her. "You need to know the truth," the stranger said. "Daniel isn't the only one who's been searching for you." Clara stepped forward, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and anger.
"He's not who you think he is," she said.
I was stunned. How could Clara be here, alive and looking exactly as she had in my memories? The stranger explained that Clara had been reincarnated, just like me, and she had been searching for Daniel to confront him about the past. "He's been hiding the truth from you," she said. "And it's time you knew." Clara's revelation shook me to my core. She claimed that Daniel had been manipulating me, using my memories to control me. "He's not trying to reunite with you out of love," she said. "He's trying to atone for his guilt." She explained that in our past life, Daniel had been the one to push her off the balcony, not out of anger, but out of desperation to be with me. The truth was darker than I had ever imagined. I confronted Daniel, demanding answers. At first, he denied it, but as I pressed him, the truth came out. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he said, his voice breaking. "But I couldn't lose you. I've been trying to make things right, to find you again, and fix what I broke." His confession left me shattered. I didn't know if I could forgive him, but I also couldn't deny the love I still felt. I found myself at a crossroads, torn between the love I felt for Daniel and the betrayal I couldn't ignore. Clara urged me to walk away, to start fresh without the weight of the past.
"You deserve better," she said.
But the stranger had a different perspective. "Love isn't perfect," he said, "but it's worth fighting for, even when it's messy." I spent days in solitude, reflecting on everything I had learned. The memories of our past life were a mix of beauty and pain, and I realized that love, in any lifetime, is never simple. Finally, I made my decision. I would give Daniel one last chance, but only if he was willing to face the consequences of his actions and truly change. Daniel and I met at the clock tower, the place where our journey had truly begun. I told him my decision, and he nodded solemnly. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said. "I just want a chance to make things right." But before we could move forward, Clara appeared, her presence a reminder of the past we couldn't escape. "You can't just erase what you've done," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. The three of us stood there, the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. Finally, Daniel turned to Clara and apologized, his words filled with genuine remorse. "I'm sorry for everything," he said. "I can't change the past, but I can try to be better in this life." Clara's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, I saw a glimmer of forgiveness in her expression. In the weeks that followed, Daniel and I began to rebuild our relationship, but it wasn't easy. The guilt and pain of the past lingered, and there were moments when I wondered if we were making a mistake. But slowly, we started to heal. We spent hours talking, sharing our fears and hopes, and learning to trust each other again. Clara, too, began to find peace. She and Daniel had a long conversation, and while they couldn't erase the past, they were able to let go of some of the pain. "I don't think I'll ever fully forgive him," she told me, "but I'm ready to move on." Her words gave me hope that we could all find a way to move forward. As the seasons changed, so did our lives. Daniel and I decided to start fresh, leaving the town where so much of our past had unfolded. We moved to a small cottage by the sea, a place where we could create new memories without the shadows of the past looming over us. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Clara stayed in touch, and over time we became friends. She had found a new purpose, helping others who were struggling with their own pasts. Maybe this is why we were brought back, she said. To help each other heal. Her words resonated with me, and I realized that our journey wasn't just about love, it was about redemption. One night, as I lay in bed, I had one final memory, a moment I had buried deep within my soul. It was the day Daniel and I had said goodbye in our past life, knowing we might never see each other again. We had made a promise. No matter what, we would find each other again. That promise had carried us through lifetimes, and now, finally, we had fulfilled it. I turned to Daniel, who was sleeping beside me, and whispered, "We made it." He stirred, his eyes opening to meet mine. "We did," he said, his voice filled with quiet certainty. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Years passed, and our love only grew stronger. We built a life together, filled with joy and laughter, but also with the quiet understanding that love is never without its trials. The memories of our past life remained, but they no longer haunted us. Instead, they served as a reminder of the resilience of the human heart. One evening, as we watched the sunset over the sea, Daniel turned to me and said, "No matter how many lifetimes we live, I'll always find you." I smiled, knowing it was true. Our love was eternal, a bond that transcended time and space. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace I had never known before. One stormy evening, as rain lashed against the windows of our seaside cottage, there was a knock at the years past, and our love only grew stronger. We built a life together, filled with joy and laughter, but also with the quiet understanding that love is never without its trials. The memories of our past life remained, but they no longer haunted us. Instead, they served as a reminder of the resilience of the human heart. One evening, as we watched the sunset over the sea, Daniel turned to me and said, "No matter how many lifetimes we live, I'll always find you." I smiled, knowing it was true. Our love was eternal, a bond that transcended time and space. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a sense of peace I had never known before. Daniel and I exchanged puzzled glances. We weren't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I was met with the sight of a young woman, drenched and shivering. Her face was pale, but her eyes were sharp and familiar. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said, "but I need your help." She introduced herself as Lily, a distant relative of Clara's. She had been researching her family history and stumbled upon our story. "I think I'm connected to all of this," she said, pulling out an old photograph. It was of Clara, Daniel, and me, standing together in front of a clock tower. But there was something different about this version of the photo, a fourth figure barely visible in the background. It was Lily. Lily's arrival opened a new chapter in our story. She explained that she had been experiencing strange dreams and memories, much like I had when I first met Daniel.
"I think I was there," she said.
"In 1945. I think I was part of your lives." Her words sent a chill down my spine. Could it be possible that Lily had been reincarnated too, tied to our tangled past? We spent hours poring over old documents and photographs, piecing together the puzzle. Lily's presence in the photo suggested she had been more than just an observer. She had been deeply involved in our lives.
But how?
And why had her memories only surfaced now? As we dug deeper, we uncovered a shocking truth. Lily had been Clara's younger sister, a quiet, overlooked figure who had witnessed everything. Lily's memories began to return in fragments, revealing a side of the story we had never known. She had been the one to comfort Clara after her heartbreak, the one who had tried to mend the rift between Clara and Daniel. But she had also been the one to witness Clara's final moments, a secret she had carried with her into this life. "I didn't want to believe it," she said, tears streaming down her face.
"But I saw what happened that night."
Clara didn't jump. She was pushed. Her words shattered the fragile peace we had built. Daniel's face turned ashen as he realized the truth. He had been wrong about what happened that night. It wasn't Clara's despair that had led to her death. It was someone else's hand. But whose? As we grappled with this new revelation, Lily handed me a letter she had found among Clara's belongings. It was addressed to me, from Clara, written just before her death. The final line read, "Forgive him, but never forget." The letter from Clara was filled with raw emotion, each word a testament to her pain and love. She wrote about her struggle to let go of Daniel, her jealousy of our bond, and her fear of being forgotten. But the most chilling part was her description of the night she died. "I didn't jump," she wrote. "Someone pushed me. I don't know who, but I know it wasn't Daniel." Her words left us stunned. If Daniel hadn't pushed her, who had? Lily's memories began to fill in the gaps. She recalled a shadowy figure at the party, someone who had been watching Clara closely all evening. "I didn't think much of it at the time," she said. "But now I wonder if that person had something to do with her death." We decided to investigate the mystery of the shadowy figure. Lily remembered that the person had been wearing a distinctive brooch, a silver rose. With this clue, we began searching through old photographs and records, hoping to identify them. Our search led us to an unexpected name, Thomas, the rival Daniel had mentioned earlier. But there was more to his story than we had realized. Thomas had been deeply in love with Clara, but she had rejected him in favor of Daniel. Consumed by jealousy, he had attended the party that night, determined to win her back. Lily's memories suggested that he had been the one to push Clara, though she couldn't be certain.
"He was desperate," she said.
"I think he wanted to hurt Daniel by taking Clara away from him." Armed with this new information, we tracked down Thomas's descendants. His grandson, a man named James, still lived in the area. When we confronted him, he was reluctant to talk at first, but eventually, he revealed a family secret. "My grandfather never got over Clara's death," he said. "He carried the guilt with him until the day he died." James handed us a journal Thomas had kept, filled with entries about his love for Clara and his regret over what he had done. The final entry was a confession. "I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted her to see me, to choose me. But I lost control, and now I can never take it back." His words were a heartbreaking reminder of the destructive power of jealousy and regret. With the truth finally revealed, we returned to the clock tower, the place where our journey had begun. We held a small ceremony to honor Clara's memory, laying flowers at the base of the tower and reading her letter aloud. "Forgive him, but never forget," I repeated, my voice trembling. "We won't forget you, Clara. Not in this life or any other." As we stood there, the wind carried the sound of distant laughter, like an echo from the past. For a moment, I thought I saw Clara's face in the crowd, smiling at us. Then she was gone, and I knew she had finally found peace. Daniel took my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We've come full circle," he said. "Now it's time to move forward." Life after the revelation was different, but in a good way. The weight of the past had been lifted, and we were free to focus on the present. Daniel and I continued to build our life together, stronger than ever. Lily stayed close, her presence a reminder of the bonds that tied us all together. She even started writing a book about our story, hoping to share its lessons of love, resilience, and forgiveness. One evening, as we sat on the porch of our cottage, watching the waves roll in, Daniel turned to me and said, "No matter what happens, I'll always be grateful for this life with you." I smiled, knowing he meant it. Our love had survived lifetimes, and it would continue to endure, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Years later, Lily's book was published, and it became a bestseller. People from all over the world reached out to share their own stories of love and loss, inspired by our journey. It was humbling to see how our experiences had touched so many lives. Clara's memory lived on, not as a tragic figure, but as a symbol of the enduring power of love. One day, a young woman approached me at a book signing. She had tears in her eyes as she handed me a photograph. It was of her and her partner, standing in front of the clock tower. "Your story gave me the courage to fight for my love," she said. "Thank you." In that moment, I realized that our story wasn't just about us. It was about everyone who had ever loved and lost, and everyone who had found their way back. As I sit here now, writing these final words, I can't help but reflect on the journey we've taken. Love is never simple, but it's always worth it. Daniel and I have faced our share of challenges, but we've also experienced moments of pure joy and connection that make it all worthwhile. Our love story is a testament to the resilience of the human heart and to the belief that love can transcend time and space. To anyone reading this, know that love is worth fighting for, even when it's messy and complicated. And to Daniel, my eternal love, I say this: no matter how many lifetimes we live, I'll always find you. Forever yours.